G'day, Tragic here, and welcome to my thoughts on Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the board game. So like always, after I finish a playthrough, I do a little thoughts. It's sort of like a review, but it's more about a reaction to the game than a proper review. Now, if you did watch my playthrough, there were some problems with it. Basically, I got a lot of rules errors. It was a blind playthrough, so it was literally my first time playing. And I only got up to round 5 or 6 or something out of the entire scenario. So I didn't even complete the scenario. And there's a few reasons for this. And it really leads into my two main criticisms of this game. One, the rulebook is really not very good. I mean, it is bad. And not just the rulebook. There are inconsistencies in wording on the cards and the rulebook and some of the handouts and stuff. It's just a mess and quite confusing at some points. Not clear at all. And I think this is possibly through a translation problem, but whatever. The point is bad rulebook. And that led to my playthrough on the channel being one of the most rule error ones I've had. Now, if you're wondering, oh, that's just you, Tragic, you used to suck at reading rules. No, it is not just me. The rulebook is so bad that a community-led project to rewrite it has happened. And they're constantly adjusting it, and there's a whole community-written rulebook, which I only found out recently exists, where the community together have rewritten the rulebook out of all the FAQs and questions, because the rules section of the BGG is like 300-400 posts or something already, not like replies, like topics. And it's, that is the real problem this game has. For a game that has got quite a lot of moving parts, there's quite a lot of ambiguity in the rules. And more importantly, I think there's inconsistency in keywords and the way the cards are worded, and I think that's a little bit upsetting. The other major complaint I have about this game isn't really a complaint, it's a personal preference, I guess. And that is that the game is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. When I read the rules, I was worried that the combat, the neutral combat, would be insignificant. I thought it'd be very, very, uninteresting. But the neutral combat, fighting all the neutral units and then later fighting the player versus player characters, because even though I played the, 5 games or whatever on my channel, I have since played a full weekend of 2 games of this with other human beings in a 4-player setting. So I think I've got a good handle on it now. And we also had the proper rule, not the proper, the rewritten rule book, so it went a lot smoother as well, plus all my experience playing on the channel. Whatever, what was I trying to say? Oh yeah, so I thought the neutral combat would be kind of patchy, and most of the interesting parts of the game would be building my decks and exploring the map and moving around. But it turns out the combat is actually very, very cool. It's really interesting. It's a lot of fun. One of the things that makes it interesting and fun is that it's got very strict timing. There's all these different events that trigger when the cards can be played, and more importantly, where the cards' effects stop being active. So when you're reading the manual for the first time, this isn't very clear because of the way the rule book's written. And you think, wow, this spell is so strong. And then when you actually get into the meat of how the combat works, you're like, oh, actually, the effect only lasts this long and I can only cast it at this exact moment. And it creates a much more tactical and interesting combat system. The downside of that, and this is the personal preference / complaint, is that it really is quite long. The game itself is long. If you're playing and you've got 2 heroes out, you can have 3 combats per turn, easy, and especially in the late game. And these can take a while. I mean, they really add up. Now, there is a quick combat rule that allows you to basically auto-resolve combats of lower level, but we found in our games anyway that you're basically attacking everyone as you move out into the map anyway, so there's not a lot of lower level stuff to just take over. See, there was a lot of confusion, I guess, when the Kickstarter went live, why it was saying it was a 3-player game, because 3 players is an unusual number for a game, particularly a versus game. And yes, it could be because of the amount of factions in the core set and all that kind of stuff, but I'm pretty convinced that it was released as a 3-player game originally so they could have a less scary game time on the product. I mean, anytime a board game has a projected game time, it's always under. It always goes longer when you play it yourself. And that's because, the play testers have played it a million times, so they're just banging through it. But, when you're learning the game particularly and you're talking, you're chatting, oh, hang on, I've got to go get a beer, or, your kid calls you, you've got to go upstairs, whatever. A game that says, oh, this is going to take 2 hours, it can take 4 or something like that. The point is, this game took a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. Playing solo, it took a lot longer, and playing with 3 other people. So we were playing 4-player games. But, they were long games. And it's hard for me in my current state at the moment with my life going on to find gaming times in those kind of chunks, like really big, long chunks. So that was a real disappointment for me. This is one of the reasons I love Mage Knight, because the combat's deterministic. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of tactical information going on in your head, but the actual combat is basically I just put cards on the table and boom, I'm done. And this game, it has this sort of, it's not chess-like as in the complexity of chess, but it's got like this little mini game combat system, just like in the computer game, which is a lot of fun and really interesting, but it takes time. Now, I have seen in the variants forum already people trying to speed up the game for people who are time poor. And I haven't tried it yet, but it sounds all right. But, we don't really want to talk about a game that requires variants, all right? So that's not too cool. So that's something to take into account, is that this game is a lot longer than I expected it to be. It's a time sink. So those are really my 2 major problems with the game. Is that the rulebook is a mess. The components have some inconsistencies in keywords and wording, which make things weird. Also, and you get this a lot in first-time Kickstarter, well, not first time, but, edition 1 Kickstarters, is that there's a lot of printing errors. Like you go, why does this windmill have this icon? And then you spend ages trying to figure it out, and then you go to the forums and you find out the designer's gone, oh, that's a misprint. And that happened a couple of times to us as well. And this is very, very common in Kickstarters. Yeah, so that's my 2 major complaints about the game, length and the rules. But on the plus side, let's talk about the pluses. 1, the game is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. It looks fantastic on the table. It looks fantastic on your shelf, that big, beautiful black box. The box I have is a big, beautiful black box. There's different versions of it. Whatever. The point is, it looks fantastic. The components are top class. I love them all, except for the premium tokens. They are terrible. They are one of the worst premium tokens I've ever received from a Kickstarter. They're basically just thin, ugly, plastic tokens that feel like, those Connect 4 kind of tokens. They're horrible. So horrible, in fact, I spent some extra money to bling the game out to replace them already, because everything else in the game is gorgeous. Really, really gorgeous. The miniatures are fantastic. The maps look great. The art looked great. The cards are great. Besides some wording, the layout and everything of them looks great. The graphic design of it. It is a gorgeous game, and it plays really well. The miniature combat for the battlefield combat, which you didn't see on the channel, awesome. The neutral combat on the smaller board, that is also really good. Really, really fun. Like, surprisingly, almost my favorite bit of the game, the 2 combat systems. All the great locations, there's a lot to like in this game. It's really, really good and fun to play. And I am pretty much 100% committed to buying the new expansions, because there's more expansions coming. Those of you that know the computer game will know that there are factions missing from this game that are in the computer game. And I am convinced all of them are going to come. They've already announced 3, I think. So there's probably going to be a Kickstarter coming soon that's going to have, 3 or 4 faction boxes that you can get in one go. And I'll probably get that. And probably meaning I will get that. One of the cool things is actually that they're going to release a faction called the Cove. For those of you that don't know, Heroes of Might and Magic 3 has been around, since early 90s. And it's still played competitively to this day. You can go into online leagues and get games and play this game right now easily. There's a huge active modding scene and player-based scene for this game. And what's interesting is that to be legal for these tournaments, you have to have a mod, and I forget what it's called. I'd have to look it up, but you have to get this mod. And in this mod, apart from other things, it has 2 custom homebrew factions. One's called the Cove and one's called Factory Town. The Factory Town's sort of like a steampunk kind of town, and the Cove is sort of like a seaside town. The Factory Town's interesting because it's sort of based on an official town that was taken out of the game. So they've sort of put it back in. Anyway, the point is, to play in the online leagues, and it's been this way for a while, you have to have this mod installed. So the Cove and Factory Town are as integral to the vanilla, in inverted commas, Heroes of Might and Magic 3 experience as anything. Most people that are playing this game and have played this game for decades are playing these factions already. So the fact that they're going to release a Cove expansion is just a chef's kiss to the Might and Magic 3 community, because not only is it obvious that they're honoring the game, they're honoring the community that has been keeping this game alive for so long. So I'm so excited for Cove, and I really hope they put Factory Town in as well. Plus, there's missing factions they haven't added yet. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on and coming. Also, every faction box in the Kickstarter, like say, the Demons, or I don't know, I think it was like the Dungeons or whatever, they've added extra mechanics. So I'm really curious to see what mechanics get added. For example, one of them came with siege weapons. So, in the computer game, you can get like the medical tent or like the ballista and all that kind of stuff. That actually comes in an expansion box. And the demons obviously have the summoning abilities and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious to see what they're going to add to this game. It's not just going to be new factions. My point here is that I like the game. I've only played it a few times, and I'm already going, if they bring out an expansion, I will buy it. And I think that's pretty high praise. So another thing that is interesting to take into account is the miniatures in this game. Now, the miniatures were kind of like an additional add-on that you bought when you paid for the Kickstarter, or if you got like an all-in or something, and they are almost superfluous. Now, there are miniatures that are part of the Battlefield expansion, and they're cool. You want to have them for that because it really works well with the miniatures. But there's also all these other miniatures like little morale posts and little gems and little ore things. And the thing is, they're completely unnecessary. For example, if you can, when you set up the map, you can place little chest minis on all the places where there are chests. When the chest is discovered, you take the chest off, it's gone. It's a nice thing. It's a nice visual thing. But you know what? The chest is printed on the board. You don't need them. I mean, you could save yourself $60, euros, or whatever it is on the miniatures and just not get them. They are completely superfluous. Yes, that's what bling is. It's not like they lied to us, but I think that if I was going to buy this game now, I wouldn't get them. In fact, it just makes the game more fiddly to have them. You can't move around the map. It's about bumping things and knocking things off. So that is one thing that some people are a little bit upset about. So all in all, what have we got here? We've got a game that I think is very good. I enjoy the art. I enjoy the way it plays. I really like the combat system. And I think that the card deck building and managing your town and all that is awesome. I mean, that is really awesome. And I would have been happy with just that, you know what I mean? And then quick combat for everything else. But the combat's like an extra cherry, and a good cherry. Like, it's actually better than the rest of the game. But on the other hand, it's long, really long. Now, there is a solo mode that you can play, which I haven't shown anybody, where you're actually playing against an AI-controlled deck. So it's like a deck of AI cards, you know what I'm talking about? And it's story-driven. They've got like, a campaign with dialogue and a little book-written stuff in it. And I haven't played that yet. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in it at all. I might give it a go just to try it out. But in my experience, AI-controlled board games are just not that interesting to me. Like, I play a lot of solo games, but I usually play them just by playing multiple-handed. So if it's co-op, I play a couple of players. If it's a versus game, I just play both sides. In my experience, most solo rule sets that are added to games are not very good. No, that Terra Mystica solo variant is not good. That Castles of Burgundy solo variant, that's not going to be good. That's my opinion. Now, I just need to mention this because I have not played the solo variant of this game, so I can't really comment on it. And it has all its own things going on. And there's actually another variant of this game as well. If you buy the Battlefield expansion, not only do you enable yourself to have more interesting player versus player battles on a more detailed, more complicated battlefield, you also get a version of the game that doesn't use the game board at all, like all the tiles. It's a pure combat game where you're drawing like landscape tiles from a deck just to, power finding spells and finding stuff. And it's all focused on the combat. And I haven't played that yet either, so I can't comment on that. I mean, this is a huge game with a lot going on. It's got 3 major variants. It's got the sort of mini Battlefield version of the game, and it's got the solo AI card version of the game, and then it's got the game itself, like the real game in inverted commas, and that's got versus and co-op. And there's even like variants to the Battlefield version of the game as well, where you can play where it's just like, more like Magic the Gathering. You just pick your army and fight. So the question is, this is a game good? And I think it's a big yes for me. I really enjoyed it. I love playing it. It was just a little long. That's my really only massive concern. The rules thing's an issue, but, as you get better at a game, that becomes less of an issue. You know what I mean? Once you know how to play, you know how to play, and then you just, years later, you try it again, and you sort of remind yourself. Yeah, so, thinking about it as I'm rambling along, I should probably close up here. I really like this game. In fact, I'm going to go play it as soon as I stop this little recording. And I will see you guys next time.